Welcome back to 3 Point Firefighter. Today's guest is Rob Backer. Now, Rob is a 20 plus year fire service veteran and currently serves as a battalion chief for Thornton, Colorado Fire Department. He has written numerous articles for fire engineering and multiple fire service blogs. He is an instructor for the Art of Reading Smoke and the Art of the First Stew. Both of these classes are available nationally. Today's episode is brought to you by Fire Facilities. Make training count with their custom made, all steel live fire training facilities. Their made in the USA towers and burn rooms are the best for preparing, responding, and surviving the challenges you face every day. Yeah, just because. Okay. Um, so right off the bat, I want to ask you about the shirt. I saw the shirt. I love it. You know, science is greater than opinions. Tell me about that shirt.
That was probably a couple years ago now. Things were starting to blow up, and there were a whole bunch of other firefighters that were putting out apparel for their company, if you will. That it became a curiosity, it became intriguing, and a number of them were using it not for personal profit, but for to fund other endeavors. Basically, to keep the classes cheap, to keep the training cheap.
Mhm.
So I kind of pulled the trigger, uh, designed and bought 50 shirts. Um, None of them have gone out yet. I haven't put any up for sale or anything like that. I haven't gotten that far advanced. I have a registered domain website, but haven't built a web page because I have no clue on how to do that. So they're still sitting in a box, but I had to break one out and wear it periodically just to see if I like it, and I do.
Uh, oh, I love it. I tell you right now, I will send you money at the end of this podcast so I get one of those shirts. That is badass.
Maybe this becomes the launching point for it, because it truly it wasn't an endeavor for personal profit. It was, you know what, if bringing some income in with this, or donating shirts like this to some sort of a conference raffle or a charitable cause can bring some good, or keep classes cheaper, then I'm all in.
Yeah. Love it, brother. I love it.
I've worn this out and about, or sometimes when I'm traveling and I check into the hotel, and even like the hotel clerks will be like, "I love that shirt. Where'd you get it?" Like, I made it.
What's on the is there anything on the back?
The back is just I did kind of like a mock-up of a logo for First Due Intelligence that um, it didn't turn out great. The whole idea was to it's a big Maltese cross with what I wanted was to make it look like a chalkboard, like
Mhm.
a whole bunch of chalk on a chalkboard, kind of like the inconsistent white on black. It really, everyone that's seen it though is like, oh, it's a Maltese smoke made of, or a Maltese cross made of smoke. I'm like, oh, close enough. It'll work.
Well, see, true art is, each person that looks at it gets to decide what it is. That
There,
gives you a
there we
lot of
go.
leeway.
The eye of the beholder. It can be smoke. It can be chalk. It was supposed to be like an educational intelligence thing with the chalk, but it still looks good. And yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Fantastic. So I have said for years on this podcast that we're in a renaissance in the fire service, right? And what I mean by that is we are now attaching science to what we do, and so many things that we've done in the past have been on point, but also so many things we've done in the past we've done terribly, right? And I
Yeah.
think science fills that gap. So it's exciting for me. So I'm an ISFSI instructor, the
Hmm.
International Society of Fire Service Instructors. They work hand in hand with, FSRI, UL, NIST, all that. So when we go out and teach, we teach science, right? We don't teach your personal experience, my personal experience, opinions. We teach science. So it's an exciting time in the fire service. So tell me where that shirt came into play. What was something had to aggravate you? Like, oh my goodness, these guys are just not getting it.
Uh, Truly, it would go all the way back to my first year as a lieutenant, and it's an intro story that I kind of share at the beginning of classes when I have time. That we had a structure fire where we were first due. There was smoke showing on arrival. This would have been like 2010, and so thumbs up, we got a working fire, let's go. And we did exactly what we were trained to do, which was force the door. And at that time, it was vent as you go, because opening up doors and windows lets all of the heat and all of the smoke and all of the bad stuff out. It lets cool, fresh air in. That increases visibility. It decreases temperature. It increases tenability for both victims and firefighters. And as we were pushing through, and of course, in 2010, put a hand on a wall and search for fire until you find it with the hose line.
Yeah.
As we're pushing through, basically around the perimeter of the house, and we're opening up doors and windows, it keeps getting darker, it keeps getting hotter, and that's not what we had been told was going to happen. It took us a while to find the fire. It kept progressively getting worse. Finally found it, put it out, and lots of high fives and big tough manly grunting in the front yard because we did it, and this is what we do, and this is what we signed up for, and we don't know what we don't know.
Mhm.
And then shortly after that, sitting in the art of reading smoke for the first time, and hearing Dave Dodson say, here's the science of what's going on. Here's the science of how it progresses, and here's how to interpret it. And it melted my brain of um, dispelling a lot of the myths, a lot of the opinions, if you will, of smoke tells you, or the color of smoke tells you what is burning, and a fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. Some people have been taught 60 or 90, and to learn that all of that is made up. It's not true. It's never been true. Here is the science. Here's the data. Here's the research. Um, and is the research always perfect? No, it can't be. But as we learn more, we can apply more to research. We can keep developing more data, keep generating more information, and then perhaps most importantly, share and disseminate that information. So um, the shirt, as it came to, as my teaching of the program kind of started to blow up in 2020 and 2021, there was a lot of fervent debate on the news at the time over the science of vaccines and the science of virology and how illnesses progress, and we don't need to cannonball into politics or anything like that, but it just became, you know what, like it's kind of elementary. Fire science doesn't care about your opinions, doesn't care about what you've been taught, doesn't care about, well, this one time I had a fire where this happened. um, are we doing it, or are we getting away with it? And
Ah.
inside that fire in 2010, we got away with it, but we don't know that because we don't know what we don't know. If we don't know the science, if we don't apply the science, we're getting away with it, and we can only get away with it so many times before it goes south. And
Mhm.
so it just became an effort to dispel the myths, dispel the rumors, um, and put the science out there. And it's not me telling you or me telling any class this is how you have to do it. It's me saying, here's the science, here's the data, here's the research. Take this, apply it to your department's staffing, your department's SOPs, your department's resources, and use it as you see fit. Use it appropriately.
I love how you tied that into the mask thing because you're right. We're at a time now where science and facts have become optional, and people's opinions and other people's opinions that affect you have uh, helped decide for you like what direction you want to go in. So I mean, I love that. That's actually pretty good. Um, One of the things too that you said you don't know what you don't know. So having been a training officer for almost 11 years now, I look back on some of the stuff that I've taught that were in the books, whether it was fire engineering or IFSTA, and I taught what was in the books, but the books, excuse me, but the books were wrong. So is it shame on me or shame on the books? I'm going to go ahead and say both. Because if I really truly cared, I would have done a little bit of research. Let me give you a couple quick examples. The biggest one for me is healing a ladder underneath. I've taught that for years, right? Never even thought about it until I took a class and somebody said, what the hell are you doing that for? Right? Well, the books say that. So I wasn't a thinking firefighter. I was just a robot that basically read and then regurgitated. So shame on me. But one of the ones that I see to this day, and this hopefully will tie into what we're talking about, is a 4x4 hole vertical ventilation. So that's taught multiple places, conferences, everything, and nobody questions the 4x4 hole. Now, people will also say that your your um, your exhaust has to be 1 to 1.5 times your entrance, right?
Hmm.
Depending. Well, if you look at a door, let's say door is your inlet. That's 7x3, 21 square feet. How many square feet is a 4x4 hole? It's 16 square feet. So you're not getting anywhere near it. So I'm learning that that 4x4 came from, I want to say, in Oklahoma, a university in Oklahoma that was doing a study. They had limited amounts of OSB or plywood. And so what did they do? They cut it in half. They got your 4x4 hole, but that has made its way into the fire service. And I've seen some beautiful 4x4 holes. I really have, but it's not science. So at one point, we knew what we needed to do, but we defaulted to what we were taught. All this to say is, again, going back to the Renaissance, there's people out there like yourself that are pushing science, pushing facts. How has that led you down the path from that 2010 fire to where you're at today?
It's really, we do what we were taught to do because, particularly when you're new, who are you to be questioning this 20-year veteran instructor?
Yeah.
And we all believe, and I still believe, every instructor out there who's teaching, whether it's on a national scale or it's within their own academy teaching rookies coming in, we're passing on the best possible intentions. This is what I was taught. This is what has always worked for me, anecdotal, and I'm imparting that wisdom onto you. And that anecdotal wisdom may be true. It may be scientifically true, but we don't know. And so that fire in 2010, high fiving in the front yard after, and then a week later learning we probably should have died in there. We were daring that fire to flash over. Here's the science that backs that up and backs up how that happened and why that happened. And then we can take that, if you will, the anecdotal experience and say, but here's the science, and the science matches up and the science doesn't lie. And if we're missing something, it's not the science that's wrong. It's there was a variable or two, or there was something that we couldn't or didn't account for. There might have been a special fuel package inside that building that we weren't accounting for, that we didn't know about, or we couldn't be expected to know about. So teaching now, it's the science becomes motivation. When I'm standing at the front of the room sharing the science, and you see the light bulb go off inside someone's head,
Yeah.
that hey, this is clicking, and this makes sense, and then it's challenge that. It's not accept this with blind faith. Challenge it. Take this science. Let's watch another video. Apply this science again to this video. Something different happens. Maybe. Why did something different happen? Now, on the fire ground, we might not have that luxury of time of sitting back and analyzing and testing hypotheses and so on and so forth. But having those conversations as to why did this happen? How does the science explain that? Rather than we just need to lift more. We just need to be stronger. We need to be tougher, and we need to be more. I'm going to back up before I say a wrong word because I was going to say we just need to be more aggressive. We do need to be more aggressive, but we need to be intellectually aggressive. We need to be aggressive because we know what's happening inside that building. We know where it's happening inside that building. We know how much time we have until this thing goes south. And I know that I have enough toys in the toy box right now to get in front of it before it goes south. And we can be aggressive because of that. If we pull up and we're able to answer those questions and we don't have enough resources at our disposal to get in front of it, it becomes a much less aggressive approach, maybe even defensive. That we're not going to get in front of this thing, so we're not going to unnecessarily risk the lives of firefighters for something that's already gone,
Mm-hmm.
which will probably rile some people up. But that's what the science has meant for me is to continue to ask why, and to continue to challenge, continue to test it, continue to put the science first and see how the science explains A, B, C, or D. And if not, if something evolves to the point where we think the science might be wrong, Okay, that's good, that's productive, that's healthy. Let's test it. How is it wrong? How can we make the result happen? And what's going on? And that's where like FSRI has played a huge role. Continuing, they're not, they haven't dismissed anything. They just continue to test it, and the
Hmm.
data that comes out validates what a lot of people have been doing. Or sometimes it refutes what you may be doing, but we have data and science to back it up now, and we can either choose to accept it and evolve, or we can continue to fight against it, and things are going to go south. That's just the reality.
Yes. And I'm going to go a step further and say the common thread for most of the problems in the fire service, but specifically what we're talking about here is ego, a person's ego. So I have, I had, excuse me, several years ago, I took my first PMFA class, Principles of Modern Fire Attack. And it was all about modern fire behavior based on the studies. Water doesn't push fire,
Hmm.
that class. Pretty excited, go back. Couple years later, I'm bringing it up again in a conversation with a chief officer who says water absolutely pushes fire. It absolutely does. I'm like, no, the science is showing it does. Water doesn't push fire. Yeah, it does. It does. I've seen it. Okay. I've seen it. I know for a fact I've been in a house where it's happened. I said, okay, so now I know the department. So I know back in the day how they did things: open every door, break every window, cut holes in the roof, dig underneath the fire, and open a hole there, vent till there's only studs left, basically. So I knew that the vent profile was such that, yeah, you probably, it's a pressure event, a high pressure event is what had happened. But no, since couldn't see everything, he only saw his perspective. No, that's not true. Science is wrong. I'm right. And I thought that was kind of crazy. And it's the same person who says you don't need really a whole lot of education or training. All you need is, and I'm paraphrasing, you need to have the balls to do the job, just to go in there and get it. These are the anchors that are holding back the success of the fire service, right? Um, it's people that refuse to learn the science. People, because I think it can be intimidating. If you read some of these studies, it can be very intimidating. But his ego was such that he couldn't possibly have been wrong all those years, right?
Yeah, and it's I guess at least in that example, it's not that he's wrong necessarily. I mean, fundamentally, he is wrong in the sense that water cannot push fire. It has been demonstrated it cannot push fire. But when people say that's wrong because I've seen it,
Hmm.
okay, under what circumstances have we seen it? Water cannot push fire. If you go smooth bore or straight stream,
Hmm.
you can't push fire. If you go wide fog and you entrain several thousand cubic feet per minute of fresh air
Right.
into the track, you can absolutely take that pressure front, that heat, and shove it elsewhere throughout the building.
Hmm.
And if you don't understand that that's what's happening, it's really easy to say, I opened up the line and pushed the fire through the rest of the house and we burned that thing down to the foundation. You did, but it wasn't the water that did that. It
No.
was it was all the ventilation without potentially without adequate GPM, et cetera, et cetera. But if we don't understand that, if we don't know the science, then it's really easy to say water made this thing worse. Water pushed fire throughout the house. We're just not seeing the bigger picture. In order to understand it and accept it, we have to be open minded.
Yes. Take that ego out. We got to take that ego out. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to have been right in the day, but now let's revisit today. You're not going to learn everything that you need to learn for a full career in the fire service the first year on the job. I'm sorry, you're not going to do it. It's an evolving, dynamic, exponential process that takes one element, one ingredient, and that is just for you to be curious. That's it. Got
Absolutely.
got to be curious. And in today's world, if you don't, sorry, my thing's shaking like crazy. It and I'm gonna go. I'm talking about aggravating people. I'm gonna aggravate every firefighter that may be listening to this, going, I don't know about science, but it is on you at this point. If you're not using science to make your job better, safer, and even more aggressive, that's on you. And the reason I say that is you can go to FSRI right now and take any number of classes for free, and they often count for continuing ed credits. So that's on you. If you don't take the time to look for this information, especially after hearing this conversation, that's on you. And it doesn't make our job worse or harder. It doesn't make our job less caring about the community. It doesn't make you less aggressive. It does completely the opposite of it, in my opinion. Um, well, I just mentioned opinion and science. See, there you go. I should get a T-shirt that says equal
And
to or not equal to.
yeah, I chuckle when people say we don't use science, we just use big balls to
Mhm,
fight fire. In third grade, we have a fire triangle. You have fuel, heat, and air. And once we become career or professional firefighters, even volunteers are professionals, it becomes a fire tetrahedron. But dumbing all the way down to third grade, when you put water on fire, we are cooling. We are taking away the heat element. You are
yep.
using science to fight fire. It's not complicated. We can make it complex, but it's not complicated.
Yes.
And as soon as, generally in my experience, as soon as we can open up that door to being a little more open minded to understanding things from a different perspective of how are we scientifically pulling this off, how are we getting water from the tank, from the hydrant, through a pump, through the hose, through the nozzle. That's there's a lot of math and there's a lot of physics that play into that.
Mhm.
It's okay to be dumb in this respect of I don't understand all the physics of how this water moves through this hose line and why we have to pump it at a higher pressure than what we want the discharge at because I don't have a firm grasp on a scientific level of friction loss. That's okay as long as you understand we're playing with science right now and this is what has to happen in order to get the desired result.
Mhm.
It's okay. Let's experiment, let's discuss, let's dumb it down, let's make it third grade level and just be open minded with it.
I couldn't agree more. For me, my in for all of this stuff was one simple concept, and this one simple concept applied to ventilation, to fire attack, sort of everything. And it was one that the thing is this: it's a pressure event. Heat is high pressure, cool air is low pressure. High pressure will always go to low pressure, right? That's how it works. So every time you open a door, you're creating low pressure. It's like hide and seek, right? You want to play hide and seek with the fire. So you want to close the doors behind you. You don't want to indiscriminately break windows. You don't want to indiscriminately cut holes in a roof as your default setting because it's kick-ass fun. That doesn't matter for the community. You want to create you want to keep the pressure of vent limited fire basically as vent limited as possible until you can put water on that fire. And for me, that was my end. That's where I started going down rabbit holes with what's really going on in a fire. A fire in a box. A fire outside of a box is different. A fire in a box is incredibly different. That fire wants to find low pressure. It wants cool air. It's trying to get the cool air on its side. Hey, come be high pressure. This is a lot of fun. So, talking about your 2010 fire, it sounded like to me, and I'm an armchair quarterback, but with you, so it seems like to me that when you vented and did what you did before you had water on the fire, everything lifted, everything did perfect for a little while, but then that fire said, "Hey, there's low pressure, there's cold air, cooler air. I'm going to take that cooler air and I'm going to get bigger." And then it's an exponential fight from there. Would that be a fair assessment?
Likely, yeah. That likely would be exactly what happened, and what we were taught to do likely came out of success stories from the '60s, the '70s, and the '80s of when fires weren't vent limited when we showed up.
Mm-hmm,
But over time, particularly starting in the '90s, when we started getting a whole huge influx of houses, boxes being filled with plastics and synthetics that burn differently. They have different heat release rates. They give off different fuels into the smoke as they burn and decompose. Fires now rapidly become vent limited.
mm-hmm,
So a tactic of opening things up to make our path to the fire easier no longer applies scientifically. So again, we're passed on things with good intent, anecdotal experience, and we take it and we absorb it as we should. But this renaissance that you speak of, what we're seeing now is people have immediate access to science, typically in their left front pocket 24/7.
mm-hmm.
That if I throw something out there you can real time fact check it,
Mhm.
and that's a good thing. That we can continuously test the science and make sure that it's still applicable and it's still working. And as the fuels continue to evolve, it does not appear that we're going to be transitioning back towards natural fibers and slower burning fires with lower heat release rates. It's just going to continue to get worse. We will have to adapt and adjust our tactics appropriately. And as building construction evolves, we're not building buildings like we did 300 years ago. We have new materials, new techniques, etc., new demands placed on contractors by the consumers. We have to evolve, and most firefighters can understand you're not going to fight a fire in an old school type 3 construction building the exact same way that you're going to fight it in a new engineered lightweight type 5 open concept floor plans. The
Amen.
engineering behind it's phenomenal. But we generally have to have two different tactical approaches. We generally have two different play times on the clock that we have to work with. That's okay. We just have to be aware of it, and we have to respond accordingly.
So, one thing that I've learned, once I got promoted to the training officer position, instead of being on a hand line on a truck or on an engine company going in to where my view was pretty narrow, I was able to be outside and watch certain things change. One of which is I would look at the smoke and try to read the smoke. Now I know Dave Dotson. There's a Dave Dotson art of smoke, but Rob Backer has an art of smoke. So I'm trying to figure out how did that happen? How did you have a class named just now? Truth is, I know the exact answer. By the way, this is I'm just playing with the guys listening, the girls listening. So there's Dave Dotson's art of reading smoke, and
Yes,
there's
sir.
Rob Backer's. I love the story. If you don't mind sharing that with everybody, because it's a
I
great
don't.
story.
I like the story too. Again, that 2010 fire, I had already been told, voluntold, hey, next shift you're going to go to a class called the Art of Reading Smoke. The day that I was told that is when we had that fire. So the following shift, rather than reporting to Station One for duty, I report to a neighboring training center, sit through this class, and melted my brain for 8 hours. Took pages upon pages of notes. Came back to the station, said, hey, Chief, phenomenal class. I think I should have died last week. I think we should all be at my funeral today, and probably the rest of that crew as well. Moving forward, my engine, we are not going to be venting as we go. It's a dangerous tactic now. Here's why. Here's science. Um, and the training chief also, or the battalion chief at the time, understandably did not want to swing the pendulum. Like, oh my God, Rob went to a class. Let's change department SOPs. But he was open minded and said, hey, we're going to take every fire as it comes, and I want you to always do the right thing and what we feel is appropriate. And if over time this works out, then we'll take a look at it. And once he went through the art of reading smoke, then policy changed. But the the uh, the first time I went through it, it was like that was just way too much in a good way. That was way too much to absorb. I took notes. I know I missed stuff. I need to keep an eye out for when this Dodson guy's in the Denver area again. And over the course of the next few years, wound up taking the class probably 2 dozen times because every time it was different. Every time he would talk or say something or show a video, someone in the class would have a different question or a different comment that would lead us down a different rabbit hole. And even though the same science was being taught, there were different explanations, different videos, different ways of getting different people to understand based on their experience, based on their understanding of the world, etc. And then one day, randomly, I was working at a station on the north side of our city and took like an overtime shift or a shift trade, one of the two. We come into the grocery store to shop for meals for the day, and I look off to my right and see a guy picking out produce that looks like Dave Dodson. And I kind of elbow my engineer, and I'm like, hey, that guy over there getting broccoli, doesn't that look like Dave Dodson to you? And he kind of glares at me and he goes, you dumbass, that is Dave Dodson. He lives across the street from the fire station. Like, oh shit. So I, walk up to him, tap him on the shoulder, and hey, Chief, my name's Rob. You might recognize me from like every class you've had in Denver in the last couple of years. And I pull up a YouTube video. I'm like, hey, here's a video I've been watching, and here's my understanding of reading smoke. Here's what I think should happen. Here's what I'm predicting. But if we fast forward to here, that's not what happens. So would you mind telling me what I'm screwing up, what I'm missing, what I'm getting wrong, what I'm not understanding? We talked shop for probably 20 minutes in the grocery store, and stayed in touch after that, to the extent that he reached out early 2016 and said, hey, time for me to hang him up. I've got enough digits in my bank account. I'm happy to go start transitioning to retirement, but this class is my baby. It's my blood, sweat, and tears for 20 years, 20 plus years worth of research and wanting to understand. I don't want it to just fade away with my retirement. Would you be willing to continue teaching? And yes, absolutely, without hesitation, no questions asked. So I spent about a year-ish traveling and teaching with him, kind of him taking me under his wing and putting me at the front of the room instead of in the classroom, and teaching with him to learn the ropes, and, until he was like, you know what, man, you're good. We don't need to keep doing this. I'm kicking you out of the nest. Go forth, spread the message, and really, he also put an edict on me. He's like, this class is due for a refresh. That, not that it's gotten stale or old or it's outdated, but time for some new videos, time for some new takes, some new thought processes, and so I was a little resistant to that because I was like, no, 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 this class is perfect. So I wanted to keep everything, but I understand now what he was getting at with, he has a take that's based on his time and his seniority and his experience in the fire service, and right now the fire service is different than it was 20, 30 years ago. Um, having someone that's still on the line, still running fires, et cetera, like that people have said that resonates with them. That it's not someone in retirement or sitting in a chief office who hasn't been on a fire in 10 years. That it's from the streets, if you will, street smart science, and as such, I want to keep it that way. Um, I want to keep reaching out and asking if people can. Hey, this is a fantastic video. Do you mind if I use it? Um, People offer videos. Hey, here's a video from one of our fires. We want you to use this. We want you to share it, because I emphasize in every class, like, we're not going to judge. We're not watching these videos to mock the firefighters or to make fun of the departments in these videos, because what they're doing in these videos is the absolute best that they know how to do. None of us ever show up at a fire and put forth 15% of our best effort. We never show up at a fire and be like, we're going to go viral for this. Watch this. I'm going to screw this one up. I'm going to nearly die. We don't do that. So as a result of that, when we watch, we're not watching for their tactics. We're watching for the conditions coming from the building. And if you watch it and go in your head, man, those guys suck. My department's way better than this. We would never do that. Cool. Tip of the cap to you. But that's not why we're here.
Right.
Let's figure out what you would do and why, and discuss how that would play out, or how we think it would play out. Let's watch how it does play out in the video, and let's learn from it without judgment. So that's how it came to be, and it really took off. Oddly enough, it took off during COVID. I had a class scheduled locally. A Colorado area, Denver area department was going to bring me in to teach their recruit academy, and March of 20 hit, and lockdown. Everyone stay in your houses for 2 weeks. This will all go away. The um, the class was during that 2 week period, and that department reached out and they're like, "Yeah, we can't do this in person. State laws, state rules, all this stuff. Would you mind teaching it to our recruits over Zoom?"
Hmm.
And at the time, I'm like, "What is Zoom?" And uh, never heard of it. And um, we wound up doing an 8 hour delivery with those recruits over Zoom. And the idea kind of stuck there of like, hey, this is a potential. And then following some of the social media training pages, there were people during this extended 2 week lockdown saying, hey, anyone have a line on any online trainings, or something we can watch in the recliners at the station, since we can't go out, all the conferences are canceled. So I kind of figured out how to do an online Zoom, how to do an online registration, and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Arbor reading smoke, 90 minutes, completely free. And in exchange for it being free, for the people who register, all I want is for you to email me some feedback, like how did it stream on your end? Was the video quality okay, etc. And as soon as I put it live on Facebook, it sold out within like 30 minutes because it was free.
Right.
And those people provided feedback on, hey, the video was really choppy. It wasn't great. It was like a series of still images every 5 seconds. That led me to figure out, the video quality on PowerPoint online streams much better if it's embedded into the PowerPoint presentation. If you're just doing screen share for whatever reason, at least for me, it's really choppy. Okay, a couple weeks later, 90 minutes free again, sold out in another 30 minutes. And then kind of took off like wildfire from there. I had a class where there was a crew. I can't remember the department, but there was a crew from England that was on the live stream, and a crew from New Zealand that was on the live stream, and
Wow.
to basically have three different continents in the same Zoom at the same time discussing tactics, taking themselves off mute or typing in comments or questions on, well, here's how we handle this here. It was awesome. And like I want to keep this going. So that became, hey, we're going to do another 90 minutes, but this time it's for charity, and you can register for however much money you want, but every penny that's collected is going to go to this fire related charity. I did Tunnels to Towers. We did the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation. Every class was a different charity. Wound up over the course of 2020 donating 20,000 plus, I think, to different
Wow.
charities. Here's the catch: is the following April, come to find out, the IRS treats all of that as income for me, because the money went to my account, which I then immediately donated to the charity. But the IRS was
Wow.
like, no, 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 that's $20,000 worth of income. So you owe roughly 5,000 in taxes for
Oh
that.
my
So
gosh.
so if anyone's wondering, like, hey, how come he hasn't done a charity class lately? I'm capable of doing a charity class, but I need to get with whatever charity. They need to basically sponsor it so that whatever funds are collected go directly to them and do not go through me. And
So are you not wanting to pay $5,000 every time you do a free class? Is that what I'm hearing? That seems
if
kind of
if
selfish.
I'm, I mean, if I'm gonna have to pay $5,000, I would rather that go to the charity than to the IRS.
Oh, that's terrible,
So
man.
I'm not opposed, but that just creates an extra layer, at least one extra layer of complication. So the charity classes have not been there since, but what wound up happening was people all over the country here had the online training, and then as the COVID restrictions ended or faded out, and the vaccine was widely available, and we started to get back to normal, these departments all over started reaching out saying, hey, we did your online class, it was badass, how much for you to come teach it to us in person for 8 hours instead of 90 minutes? And it just became that snowball rolling down the hill or rolling down the mountain. And so yeah, and fast forward to today.
That is amazing. But you've also done a lot of traveling with this, right?
Yes, a tremendous amount, more than I anticipated. I think more than my family anticipated. My wife is fairly suspicious that I do have a second family somewhere in the Dallas area with so much hiking there. The Dallas, Texas area has uh, really taken a strong interest in reading smoke. I've been there, I want to say, like to 10 different departments in the area in the last couple of years. Um, it in a total first world problem way kind of got out of hand, where departments would reach out and say, hey, would you be available this time frame? Like, yeah, I got those dates open, let's book it. And before we knew it, there was a period of time where between being on duty at work and traveling to teach classes, I think in one 30-day stretch I wasn't home for 28 days, which
Oh,
which
wow.
prompted me and my wife to be like, we got to do better with this. We got to actually put a cap on it, and how many times per month the schedule will allow me to travel. So trying to put that cap on, a couple of times a month max, and it just means there's a longer waiting period if a department reaches out and says, hey, how soon can you get out here? It's going to be a little bit. I'm booked out so far, but absolutely, totally can do it.
To me, I think about this, and I meant to get into some of the smoke stuff about 20 minutes ago, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. So I apologize because
Oh,
I'm
no
going to
worries. I got
divert it yet again. You just said something that made me think that the responsibility you must have felt having Dave Dotson saying, look, this is a quality program, right? Thoroughly vetted. I'm going to give it to you. And the responsibility you must have felt to, first off, to receive that gift, but also now in your mind, you probably are like, okay, I need to share this information, right? I need to share this information, which probably led you to go and do all the stuff over and over in different places. I can't imagine what I don't think anybody can. I mean, I don't know anybody else that has ever been in your situation. So that responsibility must have been, especially at the beginning, just almost like unbearable.
it was. I'll put it this way: anytime you hear me um, complain about anything related to this, it is number one a total first world problem
Mhm.
and self created. I'm not really complaining. Number two, it's not a complaint. It's these are the best problems to have. But yes, this has been the art of reading smoke was has it's been the most impactful class in my career as a student because it changed the way that I approach fires. That instead of we're going to do this because this is what the policy says or this is how we've always done it or whatever other trap
Oh, I hate that
phrase we
phrase.
use, right? The
Ugh.
trap phrases, it became this is how we're going to proceed because this is what the fire's doing, this is how it behaves, this is how it performs, so this is the right tactic based on the resources and training and experience that we the people coming to this fire have. My training and experience and knowledge is different than every other department in the country, so as such, again, I never sit in front of a class and say, this is how you have to do it. This is the line you have to stretch. And this is the, the tactical model that you have to deploy because every department's different. So there was this awesome responsibility of here at the time, here's my favorite fire service class of all time. Here's how much it has meant to me. Here's how it has changed my career. How do I deliver this class so that it's the same class for you? That you walk away and your brain is melted in the best way possible and if it doesn't change how you're fighting fire, it reinforces how you're fighting fire. I need it to
I
be
like
that
that.
important to you, and as such, if at any point in my instruction in our day together, if it's not that good and it's not resonating with you, I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me that I need to shift gears. I want you to tell me that I need to do something differently or I need to emphasize more of this, less of that, whatever. It is critically important that I make this class valuable for you and that I don't waste a day of your time. Um, so it was very intimidating. There was a tremendous amount of imposter syndrome. Quite frankly, there still is a tremendous amount of imposter syndrome anytime I go to a department or a region that gets a lot of fire, that is very busy. Suburban Denver, my department, we run 18,000 calls a year from 7 stations. And we are the normal suburban department. 80-90% of those calls are medical. It is what it is. I'm not catching 5 fires a day like some other areas of the country are. So anytime some area like that is like, hey, Rob, come on in and show us how to fight fire, it's like, oh God, I can't do that. I can't. I will tell you what the fire's doing and how it behaves, and it is extremely intimidating. And whether or not it shows on my face to them, I don't know. But it's I'm giving them 100% of my best effort every time I'm at the front of the room, and that's as good as I can do, and hopefully it's good enough for them.
I guarantee it is. Now, if I was Dave Dotson, I like firehouse pranks. We'll talk about that here in a little while. But if I was Dave Dotson, I would show up without you knowing it on one of your classes that you're teaching. I would sit in the back and just shake my head no the whole time, get up and leave halfway through just to screw with you. And then not answer your phone calls for like a day or two.
Oh God, that would, yeah. If they're not answering the phone calls, that would That would, if you ever want to see me break down and cry in front of a classroom,
That would be a great joke. That would be
if
awesome.
you were just to be like, this is all horse shit, Rob. Like you are,
Yeah.
this is, what are you doing to my legacy? Uh, that would break me. That would absolutely break me.
That's a good prank. A good firehouse prank
It would.
really is that good. It does. All right, we got to talk a little bit about smoke here because this is one of the things I was so excited to get you on here, and I thought of a trillion questions. I have now whittled that down since I've gone down too many rabbit holes with you. I like exactly what you're saying. I wasn't prepared for some of this, but let's talk about smoke. So, like I said, when I became a training officer and I had to go to fires and stand outside and either be safety or be prepared to help arson or whatever it is, I started noticing that it was there was a bigger picture that's being done there. It's not just me in a hallway that's kind of dark, right? Um, I started really paying attention to smoke. Now, this had already seen the DVDs with Dave Dotson years before. I bought in wholeheartedly, but I'm not sure I understood why. I feel like it was more of a rote thing for me. Like I would go, well, he said this, then this. I didn't fill in the blanks with my own experience and other science and all that. So, but it was amazing to the point where now, after 10 or 11 years of it, I can kind of guesstimate what may or may not happen. Fire behavior, smoke reading, all that stuff. I love that it's the art of reading smoke when it's heavily invested in science. I love that, by the way.
And
But
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, and he told me as you know through this mentorship process, it's all science, but doing it, putting it all together is an art
Yes.
because when we pull up at a house and there's smoke showing, we're going to apply the science that we know. We're going to read the four attributes. We're going to apply the science to it. We're going to predict the fire's location, progression, future, all of those things. But there are a lot of variables that we don't know about. We don't know the exact arrangement inside that house. We don't know the exact fuel package. We can take a really good educated guess.
Hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, we're going to be correct. You know, we're going
Right.
to assume that a house is normal fuel load, normal conditions, all of those things. But every once in a while, it's not going to be. And every once in a while, there's going to be some variable inside that building that we can't account for. And when we see it, we don't know it until we're in the building and we're face to face with it. You know, like it's been taught to me, and it's true. You can do everything right and still be wrong.
Yeah.
You can do everything right and still have a bad day. So it's an art. It's if you will an imperfect science. The science is perfect, but we don't have all of the details and all of the variables when we arrive on scene. So there's an art form
Absolutely.
to it.
We don't. You're exactly right. I've always said there's two. If you put a gun to my head and said you can only teach two things to firefighters for the rest of your life, it'd be fire behavior, which I include smoke in that, and building construction,
Absolutely.
fire and how fire acts in boxes. So, real quick, I want to go into the four attributes. I
Yeah,
love the four attributes, right? And they're easy to remember. And they actually, if you haven't heard them, once you hear these, I want you to go watch some videos. And it's amazing how easily it is to apply these four attributes. Could you tell us four attributes?
four attributes are volume, velocity, density, and color. And volume is essentially how much smoke is coming from this box. And volume in and of itself, it's now the least important attribute because volume is going to be there because of today's fuels. The low
Right.
mass synthetic fuels, we're going to have volume. But the comparison I make in classes is imagine you're responding, you're first due to a structure fire. You pull up in front of the house and you very quickly realize it's not a house fire. It's actually a shed in the backyard, a tool shed. And the double doors are open and there's little wisps of light gray smoke coming from the top of the door jamb. Do you have a big fire with that much volume? And everyone generally understands like, no, you don't. You have a small fire, a small volume of smoke coming from a small box. It's not a big deal. Okay, so you take a couple water cans, you squirt that fire out, you go back in service, And as soon as you go back in service, they bang you out to another structure fire, and now you're going to be first due at Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards, big box hardware store. And you pull up there, and from the top of the jamb of the double doors of the entry, you have the exact same volume, little wisps of light gray smoke showing from that building. Do you have a big fire? And then everyone goes, yeah, because that's a 100,000 square foot store, and there's about 30 to 40 feet from the top of the door jamb to the ceiling. So we're talking
Mhm.
3 million cubic feet filled up with smoke, banked down far enough to where it's just starting to lick out the top of the jamb. And what I tell them in class, the entire country is going to watch you burn this thing to the ground. You are not getting in front of that fire. It doesn't matter how big your department is. There's YouTube videos of Home Depot fires. They're defensive. They don't go well.
Well, yeah, but what if you pull at least 1 inch and 3/4? That would be enough water, right? For a 3 million cubic feet.
Whatever your booster line is, tank water, no big deal. First due can handle. Everyone else pick up. It's fine. So volumes. We're just comparing it to the side of the size of the box that it's coming from, making a judgment. Um, and it's really a reflection of how much fuel has off gassed, not how big the fire is, because the majority of smoke that we see now is due to pyrolysis or off gassing, not due to combustion or fire.
Mhm.
Velocity is next. That is the single most important read, is the speed of the smoke coming from the box. And from different parts, you're likely going to have different velocities coming out, which is a great read. Velocity is basically heat. The hotter the smoke is, the faster it moves.
And
So
what if I could interrupt you real quick? Would that be true that the velocity that you're seeing from outside is much faster inside by the fire?
potentially,
Okay.
that's an easy conclusion to make. It is potentially true. The smoke is never going to be hotter and never going to be faster than where it is right at the flame tips where it's first produced. From there, it will only cool off and it will only slow down. So in that sense, the smoke that you see coming out of the building can or should be slower than what's happening inside the building. However, the reason that the smoke cools off and slows down inside the box is because heat seeks cold, and the heat from the smoke via conduction, convection, and radiation, more third grade science, is
Mhm.
transferring to the surfaces within the box. It's transferring to the walls, to the ceiling, to the floor, to the furnishings, to everything that's in the box, and those surfaces are absorbing heat. As they absorb heat from the smoke slows down. And we might see very slow or laminar smoke coming out of the box. But depending on the fire's growth and progression, when we get there, or due to our actions or lack thereof on scene, that box sooner or later is going to become saturated. And the surfaces within that box can't absorb any more heat. And when they can't absorb more heat, they start reflecting heat back at the smoke. And now the smoke can't give away any of its heat, and then the smoke that we see coming out of the box is going to be just as fast as the smoke at the flame tips. And that's a big red flag for us. So that's why velocity becomes a critical read. Our most important read is worded another way. Is the box you're looking at still absorbing heat, or is it reflecting heat? And how is that going to impact your actions based on how many resources you have on scene now, and the timing of more resources that you have coming. What are you able to pull off at this fire? So velocity is the box still absorbing heat or reflecting heat? How fast is the smoke? Density, or how thick the smoke is, generally is reflective of the quality of burning. How well ventilated is this fire? And if we have something burning outside, generally we're not going to have much density because it's very clean burning. Again, it's an art. Could we have a pile of tires outside that are burning? Yes, and it's not going to give off thin smoke because that's a very dirty burning fuel, even outside. But generally, the thicker the smoke is, the lower the quality of burning, the more vent limited we're looking at, and the thicker the smoke is, the higher the likelihood that we're looking to trigger a hostile fire event like a smoke explosion, a backdraft, or a flashover. And then the color it has been my personal pet peeve for my fire service career, because I was taught The color of smoke tells you what's burning.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
white smoke means plastics, gray smoke means wood, and black smoke means hydrocarbons. And I accepted it, but it never sat well with me because plastics are hydrocarbons. So how come those hydrocarbons are white, but other hydrocarbons are black? And also, the snark in me always thought, what difference does it make? If I'm in the front seat and we're going to a fire and the guys in back are masking up and getting ready to go so that we're ready to go as soon as the air brake gets pulled, and I turn around and be like, hey guys, heads up, looking at the smoke header in the sky, we got a lot of hydrocarbons, a lot of natural products, and a lot of plastics in this house. Every house has that.
Yeah.
It means nothing. It's what it
And they're back there with their little pads and
yeah.
pens going, writing this down. Okay, you say
Yeah.
hydrocarbons here, boss?
Yeah, no. That's a lie that we've all been taught. It's not true. We can take any fuel and we can make it burn any color from a clean, pristine white all the way to a dirty, oily black. The color really tells us the stage of heating of the fuel.
Right.
Where is this fuel at in its heat progression? And fire is end stage heating. Fire in the normal world is always going to produce black smoke. From there, the smoke will lighten up in color as it gets filtered because the black stuff is very heavy and sticky. So as it travels a distance, the black stuff trickles out due to gravity. It's also sticky. It sticks to whatever it touches. So as it touches things and it pushes through the box, a lot of the black gets left behind. It sticks, and
On
so
the walls and on the furniture. That's what we're
everything.
seeing.
Yep,
So we need to like put that together in our brain and go, okay, I know exactly what he's talking about. We've all seen the soot covered down the long hallway and all
yep.
the furniture, everything. Yes.
And it sticks to firefighters too. That when we get a yellow helmet, a red helmet, or a white helmet, the first thing we want to do is make it darker. That's part of our testosterone fueled immaturity. None of us are really above it. Um, if we have yellow or brown bunker gear, I'm going to go roll around in the living room on this fire because I don't want to look like I'm brand new. It's inherent, like it seems to be instinctive for us. Just understand that's the fuel. That's smoke is fuel. The black stuff turning you into part of the fuel package. Um,
Oof, that's scary to think about.
yes. So basically, those are the four attributes, and generally what they mean. And then we take how the box influences them and how they influence the box. We put those puzzle pieces together, and then we start watching videos for, hey, watch this in a 5 to 10 second window. I'm going to show you 10 seconds worth of footage, and I'll repeat it. We can watch it as many times as we want, but answer the question: where's the fire? Meaning, where specifically is the fire? Don't there's always one in every class. It's like, it's in the house. Yes, it's in the house, but where in the house? Where are you taking the first line and why?
Right.
So how big is the fire? How progressed is the fire? Where are we in the time and temperature growth chart? What's going to happen next? Predict it, and how much time do we have until that happens? Take the answer, the information from those four questions, apply that against what your department has at its disposal. How many do you have on your first due engine? How long is it going to take a first alarm to show up? So do you have enough time to get in front of that before it goes south, before it flashes over and the entire building's fully involved? If you have enough to get in front of it, you have an offensive fire. If you don't, you can't get in front of this thing. It's likely a defensive fire. Simple as that.
They're great. They're great things to put in the back of your head. And everything you're talking about just now with training, with experience, you're talking a few seconds in your brain, if that long, that you're putting all this stuff together. And you'd mentioned, we become covered in soot. We become part of the fuel package. And then you mentioned flashover, backdraft, and smoke explosion. So let me ask you this. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to wrap myself out. I think I'm more wrong than right. I've got 2 marriages under my belt to prove that. But I was teaching in Fairfax County, Virginia. Now, I've been in the fire service for 30 years. To this day, I fanboy. I fanboy like crazy, right? I'm fanboying over you. You would not believe the prep that went into this. But so I'm in this class. I'm teaching this class, and I'm using their Max Fire burn box. That
Yep.
middle fire box. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm teaching that. Lo and behold, who's in my class? We're rotating different things. And so, who's in this one that I'm teaching now? Billy Goldfeder,
Oh,
right?
dude,
Yeah. There's no mistaking Billy Goldfeder. You don't look at Billy
there
Goldfeder
is
and
not.
go, is that guy Billy Goldfeder? Nope, that was Billy Goldfeder. So now I'm teaching this group of people a very complex thing in a very short amount of time. The whole time, all I'm thinking about is Billy Goldfeder. And I can see that walrus mustache and everything right there. A guy asks me, he goes, what's the difference between a backdraft and a smoke explosion? I completely blank out, completely, right? I'm looking at Billy Goldfeder. Now I'm thinking in my head, well, I'm screwed up in front of Billy Goldfeder. And the wonderful guy that he is, he saw that I was just lost, right? He didn't know I was lost because of him. He just thought I was an idiot, which is fine. And then he stepped up and said this, could you tell us? Because when I came in the fire service, a smoke explosion was was a backdraft. They were the same exact thing, but through science, we've learned they're different. Can you help clarify that? Plus, tell us about a flashover.
That's what Billy asked you.
No, that's what I'm asking
Okay,
you. In
gotcha.
case I figure there's more people out there like me that are just easily get dumbfounded, right? I looked at
Yeah.
Billy Goldfeder the whole time, and I got locked up, right? So, with that being said, who better to tell everybody the difference between a backdraft and a smoke explosion?
Probably Billy Goldfeder.
Well,
Um,
I can tell you what he said, and I agree with it. Where a backdraft is an oxygen event basically, and a smoke explosion is more of a heat event. Why a smoke explosion will normally kick off due to heat, whereas a backdraft will kick off normally because of oxygen. What are
uh,
your thoughts?
that seems like a pretty solid answer. However, I'm a detail person,
Mhm.
so the way my brain works is I would raise my hand and say, why? How does that work? What's the science behind it? And it's not challenging, it's wanting to understand. So the difference between a smoke explosion and a backdraft, the 5 second answer, a smoke explosion is an open box cold event, and a
Mhm.
backdraft explosion is a closed box hot event. And what those mean is if we imagine different temperature points within a fire as it grows, and when the fire is in its colder stages, which is still several hundred degrees, it's not literally cold, but
Right.
when it's in its colder stages, we have a fuel air mixture. You have a tremendous amount of fuel that's in the smoke, and we still have air in the box, so we have a fuel air mixture that is in a sweet spot at some point. And with a smoke explosion, what's happening is we have reached a mixture where the fuel, given an ignition source like the seat of a fire, reaches a sweet spot where it can light off. And in this case, rather than ignite, it actually detonates. The fuels detonate, but it's not hot enough to sustain combustion. So we get our detonation, but then the flame goes out and returns to smoke.
Mhm.
And if that sounds confusing, I understand. Think fire service triangle in third grade, we have fuel, heat, and air. But once we get to high school, or maybe in Proby school, it's really a fire tetrahedron. We have fuel, heat, air, and a self sustaining chemical reaction. When we have a smoke explosion, we have the triangle, but we don't have enough heat to initiate the self sustaining chemical reaction. So we will get ignition, but it's not hot enough to sustain. So it basically blows itself out, returns right back to smoke. So in that sense, it's not hot enough to sustain combustion. So we're going to refer to it as a cold event. It's also an open box event in the sense that the ventilation that was needed to make this happen was already present. It did not occur because someone opened up a window or a door. It was already there. It just reached its sweet spot with an ignition source. The fuel's detonated, but it wasn't hot enough to sustain, so it blew up and then blew out.
Mhm.
And we returned right back to a smoke condition. Open box, cold event. A backdraft is a closed box hot event, meaning it's hot in the sense that it's the hottest trigger we're going to hit. Um, when the fuels light off, we will see sustained combustion afterwards. It's also a closed box event, meaning It was vent limited. We didn't have enough air to make this happen.
Mhm.
Someone or something opened up that box, let the breath of fresh air in to immediately create an ignitable mixture. The fuels inside that box were already at or even past their auto ignition temperatures. We don't need an ignition source to make this happen. With auto ignition, it's hot enough, it lights off on its own. Rather than ignition, we got detonation, so we get an explosion, and it's hot enough that we have sustained combustion afterwards. So a backdraft is a closed box, or it was closed, something opened it up, hot event, sustained combustion afterwards. That would be the difference between a smoke explosion and a backdraft. So to Chief Goldfeder's point, um, a backdraft would be a heat driven event. We have a tremendous amount of heat. Sudden introduction of fresh air into a very explosive vent limited environment triggers the detonation, sustained combustion afterwards. A smoke explosion being air driven, um, I guess, yes, in the sense that the air that was already needed to make it happen was present. It wasn't
Mhm.
due to a sudden introduction, but we didn't have enough heat to sustain the explosion afterwards. So if we see the huge puff of smoke coming out in an explosive manner, there was likely just a smoke explosion inside that box, violently shove that stuff out, but then we go right back to the smoke condition we had, without fire shooting out afterwards.
And then the fire shooting out afterwards is going to tell us it was probably a smoke explosion.
Fire, if the fire is
Or is
sustained
that backdraft?
out afterwards, yeah, likely a backdraft event.
Yeah. Okay. We are less likely in our career to tell me if I'm wrong to see a smoke explosion or a backdraft, but a flashover. Almost every fire of modern furnishings and probably lightweight construction. Would that be fairly correct?
I would believe so. I would say any fire left unchecked in a box, if we don't do anything about it, sooner or later that fire is going to flash over. And a flashover is going to be simultaneous ignition of all the fuels in the box. So it's a hot event in that sense, and it can happen with an open or a closed box. It can happen with all the air that it wants. It can happen in a vent limited environment. The reason being, every single fuel has a flash point, which would be a smoke explosion. It has an ignition temperature where it will have sustained combustion, and it has an auto ignition temperature where it can ignite without any ignition source at all. Every single fuel in every box has that. The hotter we get, so all those temperatures are based off an assumption of 20.9% oxygen concentration. And inside a box, we're going to be at less than 20.9 because the fire is consuming oxygen as part of the combustion process, but the smoke being produced is also displacing oxygen from the box. So we're going to have a technically vent limited environment anytime we have a structure fire. All those temperatures, if we say that this thing flashover occurs at 1500 degrees, well, it would occur at 1500 degrees at a given oxygen concentration. It could occur at a lower temperature, it could occur at a higher temperature, depending on the amount of oxygen available. So the hotter we get inside any box, the less air that's needed to make all that happen. Um, so if we're going to let a fire grow unchecked and we're just going to sit out in lawn chairs and watch it grow, sooner or later, flashover is inevitable, but we can't guarantee a smoke explosion or a backdraft. So yeah, that I would say that's an accurate statement.
So, with both of these things in order, I would say if you're wanting to avoid all three things that we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
water on the fire obviously is going to be number one. Would you agree that number two would be ventilation, knowing ventilating correctly?
Ventilating correctly is key. The correctly is key.
I threw that in there. I threw that in there on purpose.
I can tell you what could happen if we just push through a box and open it up as we go, and we never flow any water, and we almost die.
Right.
The way that I like it best comes from Kyle Romagus, hose guru. Um, Water plus air equals good. Air plus no water equals bad.
Yeah.
And that's one of the easiest ways to put it is if we are putting adequate GPMs, enough water, enough GPMs to overcome the BTUs being produced in
Mhm.
the right location, we want increased ventilation with that. We want to bring that cold front with us
Yes,
to cool everything down and make the environment better for us and for them. Absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of people don't realize the same like I don't like fog nozzles. Don't like them, right? But I always have a caveat. After the fire's out, ain't nothing better because you can hydraulically ventilate. Uh, like you said, our goal is not getting our gear dark and all that stuff and being badasses. Our goal is a community, making sure that our citizens are taken care of. And if that means closing doors behind us until we found the fires, that mean using appropriate solid streams or straight streams, how to apply that, moving quickly throughout the box, all these things. Even we haven't even touched on this transitional. Fighting, shooting water from outside temporarily to drop that temperature for the citizens and us, but mostly citizens to move through there. Um, I feel like our job is at the highest level is the easiest thing in the world. But as you dive deeper and deeper and deeper into the science of it, it gets extremely complicated. Now, the good news is, through training and repetition, you can make it just as easy as you thought it was going to be, but it takes effort. It takes time. It takes stretching lines. It takes going to trainings outside your department. It takes a little bit of ego being, I've always thought about this button that you put on the outside of a firehouse. And when you go to work in the morning, you touch it with your thumb and it takes your ego out for 24 or 48 hours, depending on the shift. And then when you leave, you get your ego back because ego is okay. But I think in the fire service, ego is just a terrible thing. Because, and I'll give you an example. This past last spring, I was doing live burns with a bunch of different departments. And I base all this stuff on FSRI, the stuff that I've learned, the science, right? Science is greater than opinion. And I had a captain come up to me, a truck captain, because I had just given the speech to everybody. We got to close the doors. We do not open doors or windows until we have water on the fire. We communicate, blah, blah, blah. He came up to me afterwards and said, listen, and this is how he said it. Don't nobody close a door or window on me that I open up at all, ever. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what we do. We don't indiscriminately open up. He goes, well, let me ask you this. How am I going to see people if I don't have that smoke releasing? My response was this. We don't need to see, for one. And two, yes, it will lift temporarily. And then it's going to exponentially get worse. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes. Um, couple stories in reply. Um,
Sure.
and the reason why it's a couple of reasons why it's yes. Long story short, I was in a training. It was within my own department, and the instructor within my own department at the time was saying, "We're going to as an organization, we're going to transition away from vertical ventilation because vertical ventilation is dangerous and makes a fire worse." And okay, vertical ventilation being dangerous as a tactic. Um, I'm not a vertical ventilation expert. There are plenty of people in this country who are, and I'm not one of them. However, I do sit with popcorn and watch the comments section on Facebook and Instagram threads when people do argue over it. So I've picked up some. Best comment I've ever seen in the argument of vertical ventilation is more people have been hurt arguing over vertical ventilation than doing vertical ventilation. Uh,
Right.
that overall, it is not a dangerous tactic. People are not falling through roofs at nearly the rate that we fear they are.
Mhm.
And generally, when there is a bad outcome from vertical ventilation, there can be 6 or 7 red flags pointed out before that incident happened. That they weren't sounding the roof properly, that they were in the wrong location for whatever, without pointing fingers at anyone. Um, so it being a dangerous tactic, I don't know that I agree with that. Again, there are people who are much more expert than me. Insofar as it making the fire worse, what this instructor said is actually true. The UL study on ventilation does say that vertical ventilation makes a fire worse. However, there's a comma after that. Vertical ventilation makes a fire worse, comma, unless coordinated with an interior hose line, at which point vertical ventilation is the most effective ventilation on the fire ground.
Yep.
It's fantastic as long as we coordinate it with interior attack. The reason is you cut a hole, presumably bigger than a 4x4.
There you
But
go. There
you
you
cut
go.
a hole, and by the way, shameless plug for Nicholas Papa's book, Coordinating Ventilation. He has the science
Okay.
behind how big the hole should be,
Nice.
with how much heat any given hole can vent out. It's amazing.
Right.
It's a great book. But um, you're letting all that heat and all that smoke out, but it doesn't leave in a vacuum.
Mm.
Fresh air is rushing into that box to replace all that smoke, which is going to allow the fire to grow more, which is why vertical ventilation allows a fire to grow and become worse. That's true, unless coordinated with an interior hose line where we finish it off, we punch the fire in the throat and take it out. Real world example, if you will. I was sitting in I was at a conference. It was one of the bigger conferences, and they had an instructor ready room, big like a classroom, but it was only for the instructors where they can go in and fine tune their presentations or relax, grab a cup of coffee or a water, kind of in quiet and solitude and whatever before their class. So I'm in there like an hour or so before my class. I'm making sure that the PowerPoint looks exactly the way I want it to, and then proofreading some stuff. And in comes Steve Robertson, Columbus, Ohio. And his class, Stretching for Success, is another one of those melt my brain classes, and it is
Yeah.
kindergarten level logic. And I say that in the most complimentary sense of the term. It's amazing. So he walks in, I'm like, oh shit, there's Steve Robertson. Like, I'm fanboying. And so
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like lean closer because he's talking to someone that I don't recognize, and they're talking tactics. And so I'm pretending like I'm working on my computer, but really I'm trying to listen to what he's saying, trying to pick something up. And they were talking about knee wall fires. And
Ugh.
I don't have my city's relatively new in the grand scheme of American construction. I don't have 2.5 story residences. I don't have knee walls in my district, so I don't fight knee wall fires, but he does in Columbus, Ohio. And he's talking about knee wall fires, and I'm listening. I'm not staring at him, but I'm listening. And he goes, "Rob, has that been your experience?" And I do that thing where I look up and I look behind me to see if there's some guy named Rob behind me, and I'm like, "You know my name, you know who I am." And he goes, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And I tell him, I'm like, "Well, okay, here's the thing. I don't have knee walls, blah 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 blah." I go, "I do have a question though about knee wall fires." Because he was kind of talking about ventilation. He goes, "Yeah, what do you got?" And I said, "Well, we want to vertically ventilate as high and directly above the fire as possible." And he goes, "Yeah, that's true." And I go, "Well, with a knee wall fire, wouldn't you be asking the truck company to ventilate basically at the edge of the roof and not at the high point over the center? Because the high point over the center is basically going to be above your engine company. And ventilating that, the knee wall fire is going to be closer to the edge of the roof. If they ventilate directly above you at the high point of the roof, isn't that going to draw the fire right to you guys and make things worse and do all these bad things?" And he goes, "Scientifically, yes." And he goes, "However, also scientifically and in our anecdotal experience, when they ventilate like that directly over us and we coordinate when they punch through and tell them they're not going to bring the ceiling down on us, everything gets better for a few seconds as all that smoke and bad stuff vents out, and then we can see, and then we can easier access the seat of the fire and open it up. It's within that 30 or so second window where we do our work. Because if we were to just sit there and let it keep venting like that, yeah, then everything that science says will happen does happen.
Right.
But that little sweet spot window, he goes, I want them venting directly above us because we do get that sweet spot in which we can do most of our work in good visibility because everything is lifting. And yeah, more air is going to the fire, but it makes it easier to locate the fire, open it up, and put it out. And that meant a lot to me. And I've always taken that of yeah, the vertical ventilation is great, coordinate it, and he and his people have enough experience with it in the streets to vet it and say that's absolutely true. That gray area or that sweet spot in between ventilation and the fire getting worse, that's where we get shit done.
Right. Well, that's where the science of air and water combine. That's that perfect Venn diagram.
Yeah,
And if you don't have that coordinated attack, if you don't play with that communications to make sure you're doing the right thing, I could see it. I have seen it become terrible. It,
Yeah.
it absolutely can. So no, that's amazing. So how cool was it that he not only knew you, but like knew what you did and
Yeah,
all that?
yeah,
Because
yeah. That was. I had been through his class before at the same conference a year earlier, and went up to him and kind of fanboyed, shook his hand, nice to meet you, huge fan, whatever. But that one is, after that discussion, he's like, "Hey, what time are you teaching? Because I'm going to sit in on it." And
oh
yeah, there was the oh shit moment, like that
yeah,
you had seen Billy Goldfeder, and I was like, "Oh, I'm teaching at like 1 or whatever time it was." He's like, "Oh shit, I'm teaching at the same time." I was like, "Oh dang." Like, I won't have you, second guessing anything I say. But anytime something like that does happen, it's flattering. Like again, the imposter syndrome kicks in. Like, who the hell am I? I'm nobody from nowhere. But these people know of me, and being able to talk with him and pick his brain a little, and it means a lot. And I don't think he'll ever know how much it means to me, but that one moment right there of recognition and getting to pick his brain and ask him a few things, he's on my very short list of people that I'm trying to twist the arm of my administration. Like, this is a class we need to bring here to this department. Like, we would all be better for it. You need to get him in here before he says he's done and riding off into the sunset.
I had like I say, I fanboy, fangirl hard. I can't help it. Matter of fact, I love that 30 years in the job. I still act like it's the first week of my being in the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a class back in 2013, 12, 14, like that, and it was Forrest Reader. Now Forrest Reader is, for me, one of the best out there, best instructors. He's super knowledgeable. Um, so when I got to teach, oddly enough, it was in Colorado, right outside Colorado, for this particular class. We were teaching a basement fire, the science of basement fires. It was a live fire class. Well, Forrest, Chief Reader, was one of the instructors. So I was going to meet Chief Reader. So my wife knows that I tend to fanboy, and that it actually is an obstacle for me trying to have any kind of logical conversation. It just sounds like, hey man, you remember that article you wrote about 1403?
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty cool, dude. That's so I go there, and I see Forrest. I can't talk to him because I don't want to sound like an idiot. I've built him up in my head as this huge icon. So I don't say a word to the guy. He's sitting right next to me, and he's talking to me, and I'm like, yes, no. And I'm texting my wife. I'm like, dude, he's talking to me. She's like, just talk to the guy. So I was pretty uncomfortable. I was just like, just amazed. I've taught several times with Forrest, and I've told him that story since then. And I consider him a good friend now. But I can't imagine from his point of view what he thought about me as a podcaster when I couldn't engage him in any conversation whatsoever. I was like, oh my God. But again, I love that about me because I love the fire service. I love the people that are putting in the effort to make the fire service better, not just their department, not just their crew, the fire service. I call them landscapers. If you listen to my
Yep.
podcast at all, I call everybody landscaper. You're changing the landscape. But brother, you are absolutely a landscaper in my book. I think if I met you in person, I probably wouldn't talk to you that much. I did it to Kyle Romigus. I did it to Corley Moore, and I consider Corley a good friend. The first time I met him in person, I took his class, didn't say a word to him, not a word. And he didn't know who I was because I was dressed different and I was quiet. I didn't bug him. He has yelled at me, and since I've learned not to do that. But brother, it has been an amazing trip with you. And I love the fact that I sent you all those notes. If you look back on it,
Yep.
we really didn't talk about a ton of them. But I do have a doctor's appointment. I've got yet another penis shortening surgery I've got to take care of.
You poor thing.
Yeah, I know. It's, hey, listen, just pray for my wife. Bless her heart. The only woman I've ever seen in a wheelchair smiling. Speaking of which, I do want to, I cannot tell you how much I love having you on here. I really am I'm still pretty excited about it. But I want to ask you, I like to end two ways. One of the ways is first, I want people to, how can they get a hold of you, take your classes, read your information, read your articles? Tell me that first, and we'll go into the second thing.
The easiest ways to get a hold of me are going to be Facebook or Instagram. Facebook, I have I have my normal Rob Backer personal page. Also, Facebook and Instagram, I do have the business side of things, if you will, at First Due Intelligence. You can also get a hold of me through there. Those pages have my phone number and my email address on there. The email address is robbacker.fdi for First Due Intelligence at gmail.com. Anytime anyone wants to reach out, they can. I love talking shop. People will say, "Hey, we had this fire. Here's what happened. What do you think?" And as soon as I have a moment, I'll reply. Um,
Mhm.
and with some preface, like, well, you're telling me, and I say it politely, but basically, you're painting a picture. We don't have the entire picture, but based on what you're telling me, here are my thoughts, or
Right.
based on what we can see in this video, here are my thoughts. And then they'll be like, okay, yeah, so we were intentionally withholding some context to see what if you were right, and here's the rest of the story. Um,
Oh, gee, thanks.
yeah, in
They
which
started thinking you were full of shit.
we were testing you, which we're all firefighters. I get it. It's fine. I don't bring ego to this. Um, I don't say that I know more than you or anything like that. So anytime anyone wants to talk shop or look into hosting a class, we can always have a chat, email, phone, text, messenger, whatever.
Outstanding. What about if they want to book your class? Where do they go to do that?
Easiest way and the most direct way, if whether it's through social media or whatever, we'll eventually get in touch generally via email, and they can say, hey, what would it cost and when are you available, and I can throw that back to them, and once we agree on some dates kind of thing, I'll send them a formal proposal that'll make the legal people in their department happy, and then we'll start jumping through all those dotted T's and crossed I's to make it all happy with the pencil pushers.
Outstanding. Now let me ask you this: what's the best firehouse prank that you've ever played or have had played on you?
It's gonna be what I had played on me. I'm not great at playing pranks, but I've reached a point where I recognize that, and I'm not. So I'll just let other people do it, and I'll giggle. But the best that was ever done to me, when I was in training to become a company officer, and so I'm a firefighter, and I raise my hand for the department and say, I want to get cleared to operate. We call it out of class, to be able to ride in the seat when the ranked guy's gone, and to start the process of learning how to be a company officer, so that when promotion time comes, I can successfully pass the test and maybe be considered for promotion. So I'm training to be an officer, and I'm riding. There's a ranked lieutenant on the engine with me. He's sitting in back, and I'm in training. So I'm sitting up front for the day. It also happened to be the time when the union was in negotiations with the city for a new contract. And when that's happening, the people who are on the negotiations team, they get shift trades. People will volunteer to work for them for free so that they can go sit with the city and negotiate a contract for everyone. And so this day, there's a guy, the union president and the lead negotiator is on the crew, but he's negotiating for the day. And he had told us, yeah, like negotiations, it's going to be an all day affair. We're going to go till 5 o'clock or until we have an agreement. But it's going to be an all day affair. So he's gone all day. Well, the guy working for him, he's just, we're talking. He's like, yeah, it's just a half day standby. Because I got appointments this afternoon. I got shit I got to do. Just casually mentioning that, and I'm not correcting anything because maybe I heard it all wrong. He's okay, whatever. But as the day goes on, the afternoon comes, and this guy's like, man, John needs to come back. I got appointments. I got a hot date. Need to get out of here. I want to do all this stuff. And as the afternoon wears on, it's just he's getting more and more agitated. And he's like, man, when John gets back, he and I are going to have words. And still trying to play it off. Okay, whatever. John gets back, says, hey, oh God, marathon day, but hey, thanks for working for me. We did get a contract. Thanks for stepping up and helping out the union. And this guy says, hey, can I have a word with you in the bay? I want to have a private chat with you. Yeah, okay. So the two of them go out to the bay. Meanwhile, the lieutenant I'm working with, he's like, hey, Rob, let's go upstairs, start working on those reports, teach you how to write reports, stuff like that. So I go up there, we're typing reports. And After about 5 minutes, one of the other firefighters comes in and goes, "Dude, those two guys are going at it in the bay." John, the Union president, is coincidentally for the story, he is of Irish descent, and the guy who worked for him, his name's also Rob. He is Hispanic, and he goes, "They're going at it in the bay. It's bad. You got to get down there and break this shit up." So I'm like, "Really? Like, did we really have to do this?" Leave the office, heading out to the bay, and the words I'm hearing being screamed from the bay would make anyone blush. I mean, you got a guy of Irish descent and a guy who's Hispanic, and they are trading racial slurs back and forth, screaming at each other. And I'm like, oh God, like at least one person's getting fired today. Like this has to go to HR. Hopefully they're not going at it physically and punching each other. And what am I gonna do? Uh, and I open the door to go out into the bay, and now they're screaming about each other's, this, your mother, this, and your sister, that. And it's like, oh God, this is bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. And I open the door, and I'm terrified of what I'm going to see. And I get met with a 5-gallon bucket of water and a 10-pound bag of flour coated.
You got antiqued.
I got antiqued, and I stand there, and there's like the pause where they're like, "What's he gonna do?" And after like 5 seconds, the union president's like, "So are you mad at us?" And I just go, "Man, I am so grateful this was all a joke and planned and slow played by Martinez the entire day. Like, touche, tip of the cap, guys. I'm gonna go shower before we get a call, and please, I swear to God, if you come into the bathroom while I'm showering, it's gonna be the end of one of you." And they didn't bug me. They were actually really disappointed with it. They wanted me to lose my mind. But I was so thankful that was all a joke, and I didn't respond at all. So they were disappointed, but man, they nailed me because I had so many. I was like, at least one of them's getting fired. I'm gonna be the guy who's labeled as the guy who got them fired. Like this is the worst possible everything. There's so much racism right now, and it was all staged. So
I did see the antiquing coming. That was a nice touch. I did not see the antiquing coming. That was great.
Oh, they got me good, and where they failed, they didn't take a picture of it. They didn't have a camera ready out there, but it was
that could be a good thing as well.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, Brother Rob, I appreciate your time. I appreciate sharing what you have with us. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for the trust of, you have a fantastic podcast, and to say that, you feel that I could help further it or keep, hold the standard is very humbling. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate your time. Stay safe.
Absolutely. You too.
Our podcast today was sponsored by Fire Facilities. This Made in America company is dedicated to constructing top quality custom training structures to meet your needs. Make your training count with all steel structures that are made to last. Visit firefacilities.com for more details.